Hello and welcome to the Craft Beer Corner. For today's beer review, we've got another single brewer review, and we are going to be jumping into two different IPAs from 21st Amendment Brewing Company. Today's is going to be particularly fun because we're taking two beers that are both IPAs, but they're essentially the same beer, only one is altered compared to the original. So we're going to be starting first with their Brew Free or Die IPA, that's 7% ABV. And second, we're gonna come to the Blood Orange version of the Brew Free or Die. So it's Blood Orange Brew Free or Die, also 7% ABV. Worth noting that they mention on their packaging it's 70 IBUs. If you care about international bitterness units, I expect it'll be hop forward, probably more bitter than the average IPA. But IBUs are really subjective. It could be 10 and taste, as bitter as something that's 100. It's really all about the balance and what else is in the beer, but we'll see how these come out. Nonetheless, really excited. I've not done any 21st Amendment beers prior. In fact, I don't think I've ever actually had any, and I've heard very, very good things about them. And I'm a massive hophead, so I'm ready to jump into a couple more IPAs. So without further ado, let's jump right in, starting with the standard Brew Free or Die, 7% ABV. Okay, so jumping right in with beer number one, this is the Brew Free or Die, just the standard version, not flavored. Again, 7% ABV. 21st Amendment is based out of the city of San Leandro, California, though they were founded in San Francisco. And this specific beer was actually brewed and canned in Utica, New York. So not even brewed at their main headquartered site, just as a point of reference. But nonetheless, let's take a peek here at the label art. I don't know if they do this on all of their beers, but they've got kind of an altered Mount Rushmore little motif here, and then Abe Lincoln on the side with a fistful of hops. So really cool label art on there. I'm a big fan. And lest you don't remember this from civics class in school, the 21st Amendment to the United States Constitution was the amendment to repeal the prohibition of alcohol. So a very appropriate name for a brewing outfit. Nonetheless, let's get this cracked. Okay, so let's get this poured right in the glass. Gentle at a 45 till we got about half the beer in. Then straight down the middle at the speed of roughly a couple ounces per second, which my speed is still off, but it looks like it's forming a nice creamy head anyway. So I don't feel that bad about still learning my pour skills. We get better. Trial and error. Okay, holding this up to the light, this is a beautiful IPA and it is very, very active with carbonation. And it's a mix of all different sizes. We've got small, medium, and large bubbles coming up with quite a lot of activity. So I am sure that that helped create this beautiful, lush, creamy head. And some of the bigger bubbles are certainly causing it to collapse a little bit from the top. But overall, it ought to have decent retention, at least while the activity of carbonation is quite brisk, shall we say. Color-wise, this is the color I think of in my head when I picture an IPA. I would say that's textbook. It is not hazy style, so it's beautifully clear. Head looks pillowy. Let's see if I can smell through it. Okay, it's a little hard because this head's so thick, so I'm going to break this down just a tick and see if some of that head agitation will let some of these aromas come out of this glass. Yes, they did. Okay. It smells very much like a glass full of hops. You can't really smell the malt bill. You can smell the hops, and it smells like really a mix of floral and citrus. Dominant aroma hops. So I'm not sure what their hop bill is, but it smells very bright. It smells very refreshing. Being headquartered in California, this could be a West Coast style with high alpha that's going to impart a lot of bitters, which certainly would be a boon for me. But we're going to find out when we jump right in. Head looks good. It's still holding strong. So let's jump in. It's a very nice IPA. It's very clean. First thing, when you get it in your mouth and get it rolling around the palate, you notice just how ridiculously silky the mouthfeel is. It's silky. It's so creamy smooth. The body at 7% is not as heavy as you think it would be. I would say it's medium. I don't think really it's encroaching even on medium heavy. I'm going to jump in and make sure I'm not crazy. No, it's a medium body, nice, lush, creamy, silky mouthfeel. First thing when you get it in your mouth, you taste the hops, and it tastes exactly how it smells. So it is a mix of floral and citrus hop flavors that come through into the beer, and it's quite present. It's not overtly bitter. I wouldn't say it's Stone Rumination or Sierra Nevada Torpedo Extra IPA kind of territory, but it's certainly hop forward. It doesn't appear as though it's either a ton of or a ludicrous amount of high alpha acid hops, because the bittering comes through and it's definitely bitter prominent, but it's not pungent like those are. This is a more approachable IPA than I anticipated for the stated 70 IBUs. And again, IBUs are all subjective. It's up to each drinker's perception. It's really just a base measurement based on the contents of bitter producing agents, but their malt bill in tandem with the other natural flavors and aromas that pair from the hops themselves, they can all alter the perceived bitterness. So it may not taste that bitter to me, and it could taste astringently bitter to somebody else. I mean, we're all different. IBUs really aren't that great of a gauge. It's really just kind of the standardized measurement of the science behind bittering. Is kind of what it's good for you. Everybody's going to have to try it to determine how bitter a beer is for themselves. But I really enjoy this. It's very crisp. It's very refreshing. The citrus and the floral nature that comes through on the aroma comes full march in to the flavor, and it makes a very bright, very delicious IPA. It doesn't taste juicy. It's not got lactose in it. It's not a New England style, so I'm not going to say it's juicy, but that the citrus does come through and the floral kind of comes through as well. It tastes bright. It tastes refreshing. It's hop forward is the best way I could put it. It's a very, very good beer. Very, very well balanced. You can get the malt bill just at the start when you get it in your mouth, and then the hops just completely take over. And for me, for an IPA, that's what I like. I think this is an excellent, excellent IPA. I'm really excited to see what the Blood Orange does to this same beer. So I'm going to take my time, sip on this, come up with my scores. When we come back, we will get to the Blood Orange version of the Brew Free or Die. That one's also 7% ABV. Okay, so jumping into the second beer of today's single brewer IPA review, this is the Blood Orange version of the Brew Free or Die. Slightly varied can art, both in color. This is orange versus yellow, and this time Abraham Lincoln is smashing some blood oranges while smiling instead of throwing up a fistful of hops. So slightly deviated, still looks cool. They do interesting art on there. I'm guessing that this is a common theme on all of their beers, but I can't confirm until I can get my hands on some more, so I am keeping my eye out. Nonetheless, let's get this cracked. All right. Poured straight in the glass. I can see it's quite active with carbonation, so I don't need to be quite as brisk down the middle. I'm going to go a little more gently. It's already forming just a lush, beautiful head here. Yep. Gosh, that is just pillowy and creamy. I know it's hard to tell until I can set this down and get everything out of the way. But that is a thick, thick, creamy head. It looks absolutely fantastic. It's always nice when you can pour one at home that looks like it came off a tap at a bar. Every time it's just so appealing when you see this. Gosh, that is just thick and creamy. That is a creamy head. This would not look out of place on a nitro tap stout, legitimately. Yet again, it's another beautiful clear beer here. This one does have a bit more of an amber hue to it. Presumably due to the addition of the blood orange. That's certainly going to impart some color to the appearance, and it looks great. It is indeed very, very active in terms of carbonation. There is a little bit of medium-sized carbonation bubbles that's predominantly clinging to the sides of the glass and going up under this layer of thick, pillowy foam, but the dominant carbonation is super fine, tiny, tiny carbonation bubbles that are rising, which I'm sure are primarily responsible for this thick, luscious, creamy head. And I have a suspicion it's going to impart a nice, silky, creamy mouthfeel, as is typically the case. But nonetheless, it looks great. Let's give it a sniff here. Okay, I can smell that it's an IPA, no question about it, but I'm going to have to break down, sadly, some of this head as I did on the last one. It's just so thick. It's not really letting the aroma fully rise out of this glass. And as we all know, we taste first with our nose. So I would like to get a good sense of the aroma for a jump in for this first sip here. That looks pretty good. Okay, yeah, that definitely opened it up. It smells remarkably similar to the prior. It's got a citrusy edge and slightly floral. You can smell the blood orange on this, no question about it, and it really accentuates the natural citrus aroma that's in the specific hops that they used. Really smells great. It smells bright and refreshing. Not dissimilar to last, just a bit more citrus forward even. So let's jump in, give this a sip. Oh, that's really nice. That's really nice. So, okay, before I get too deep into this, off the bat, what you should know is, well, this may be the blood orange version of the same beer. As a beer, it's completely different. It completely changes the entire drinking experience. And indeed, this is significantly more bitter up front. I don't know if they added in some of the oils or rind, maybe zested in the boil here from the blood orange, which would naturally add bitters. Citrus, rind, and the oils therein do add a nice bittering effect to foods and certainly to drinks, so beer brewing. So if they did zest it or brew with some peel or some rind, I am not surprised that this is quite a bit more bitter forward. It's significant how much more bitter forward, which funny enough, looking on the side, see if it mentions anything about IBUs. I could have sworn the last one did. It says up top. Says the same, so 70 IBUs, but this goes back to what I was talking about. International bitterness units is just a baseline measurement that is statistically measured based on the bittering agents in a beer. The number itself, in terms of your own personal perception, is really mostly pointless and meaningless. You could have a beer that says it's 15 IBUs that taste obscenely bitter just based on the balance of other ingredients in the beer. You could have one that's 200, 250 that doesn't taste bitter just based on the balance of other ingredients in the beer. A really good case example for that is if you look at New England style IPAs, which have lactose added to them. So they're sweet, which accentuates the natural kind of juice-like flavors. That's why they'll often call them smoothie, juicy, fruity, all of that you don't normally associate with an IPA. Because once you add in the milk sugar, which cannot be broken down by yeast and converted into alcohol, that's why it stays sweet. Same thing with milk stouts. Lactose is a sugar derived from milk, hence the name milk stout. It's a nod to the sugar. Once you add that in, it completely changes the beer. I mean, it just completely changes the beer. It's its own animal at that point, which is why there's so many subcategories of beers. Well, one of the reasons. There's many different ways to do them. But this, as a standard IPA with this nice citrus added, it really brings up the IBUs. So perceived IBUs, not the actual IBUs, but the perception of bitter. So the converse of this is what's true versus, say, a New England style, where they tend to be more juicy and sweet and less bitter. They could have higher IBUs than this, but this is going to taste less, this is going to taste far more bitter because it doesn't have any milk sugar in it. There's nothing to sweeten it. You just get the base beer and the bittering agents, and it makes a very profound effect on the palate. So that said, let's jump in again. Let's explore body, mouthfeel, and finish. The body on this one is essentially identical to the last one. The mouthfeel is essentially identical to the last one. The finish is where it really changes. Up front, it's significantly more pungently bitter. And you just get this burst of blood orange, and it's bitter. The hop bitters pair with what I presume they did either zest or peel or rind or whatever you want to term it of the actual fruit, which has those natural acids and bittering agents in it that just pairs just beautifully, absolutely beautifully with the natural hoppiness of the IPA, and it accentuates it and it elevates it. So this is significantly, perception-wise, more bitter than the non-blood orange version. For my money, I'm a massive hophead, that's no secret. I do enjoy this one better. If you like a more bitter, intense, in-your-face IPA, this would be the one I would suggest. And the blood orange is really nice, and it's not insane. It doesn't drown out the base beer. It doesn't drown out the hop characteristic. It just accentuates it and kind of increases the perception of all of it. Jumping back in, I want to see precisely how this flavor develops across the finish. I keep getting sidetracked with all this other information to throw at you. Here we go. Up front, you just get blood orange immediately, and it gets intense. The flavor intensifies, the bitterness intensifies, and you start tasting the hops and how it all blends. You can taste the malt bill behind that. Essentially tastes identical to the non-blood orange version. This is just more intense in terms of the bitters, and you get that nice intensity of the blood orange flavor. It kind of apexes, and then you can still taste everything very evenly. Orange, hops, malt. Very, very even. Nothing really overpowers anything else. And it's a very smooth, standard looking bell curve kind of out to the end of the finish. It does linger quite a bit. The blood orange and the bitters and the hops really stick with you. The malts kind of finish about 3/4 of the way through the finish, and you're left over with this very citric and hop forward bittering, and it really lingers. I can still taste the blood orange and the hops and just that lingering bitter on the back of my palate. It's absolutely great. Very, very long finish. Same beer with one little tweak, and it's a completely different beer drinking experience. I absolutely love this one. I'm going to take my time sipping on this, come up my scores. When we come back, we will get both beers ranked from top to bottom. Okay, now that we've gotten to enjoy both of these delicious beers, we're going to go through and get them ranked. Starting with the standard brew-free or die. This is the non-flavored version of the two IPAs. 21st Amendment Brewing Company, again, is based out of San Leandro, California, though they were founded in San Francisco. And these beers specifically were brewed in Utica, New York. So if you care, slight deviations there. But nonetheless, starting with the aroma. The aroma on this one was nice. It was certainly above average, but as can often happen when a beer has such a thick, creamy, luscious head, It's so dense that the aroma has a hard time escaping out from underneath it to really give you an idea of it. It did open up once I was able to get the head broken down a little bit, but it wasn't over the top. It just gets high end of average. It gets a 6 out of 10. For the taste, very, very good beer. I really enjoyed it. And that they put 70 IBUs on the can telling you what the actual base number is. I tend to not pay that much mind to IBUs. It's a gauge, but as I mentioned, and I'll keep mentioning it, IBUs don't measure bitterness perception. Perception is everything when it comes to bitterness. And, I gave plenty of examples, and this was a good case. Did I expect it to be a little more bitter forward and present than it actually came out to me? Personally, yes, I did. But IBUs, they're really kind of a useless statistic. It's a gauge. Perception is everything when it comes to bitterness. But I did enjoy the beer, and it was very hop forward. I gave it an 8 out of 10. Body on this one. For 7% ABV IPA, that's kind of getting in the upper end of standard IPAs. I did expect it to have a lot more substance than it did. It was okay, but it wasn't top tier. It just gets wholly average, a 5 out of 10. Mouthfeel, complete 180. The mouthfeel was just as silky and creamy and lush and thick as could possibly be. This was one of those perfect examples of it could have been poured off of a tap. It was that silky and smooth. It gets a perfect 10 out of 10. For the finish on this one, it had a nice finish and it was a long finish, but it wasn't top tier. The bitters really didn't stick around as long as I would have anticipated. They didn't have enough staying power to really extend it, but it was above average. I gave it a 7 out of 10. Head and retention, as I mentioned when discussing the mouthfeel, it gets a perfect 10 out of 10. It was just thick and lush, and it forms because of that fine effervescence. Typically, not always, but typically, and this was no exception. Appearance-wise, this is exactly what I picture in my head when I think of an IPA. It's what I want to see when I'm served one. It gets a perfect 10 out of 10. Balance on this. This was a very well-balanced beer. You could taste the malt backbone, and you could taste the hops and tell that there were different individual hops in there that added different both aroma and flavor profiles, and they did a great job. I gave it a 9 out of 10. Feeling in the intangible. I really enjoyed this beer. Just for me, I would have liked at 7% the body to have a bit more substance to it, and I would have liked the hops to come through a little more pungently and a little more bitter forward in the flavor, which would have also helped extend the finish just due to the higher alpha acid content. But I did really enjoy it. I gave it an 8 out of 10. Finally, as an example of the style, I give it the same score as my subjective score. It's overall a very good IPA, certainly above average. Just a few little minor nitpicks. Really it comes down to hop concentration, alpha acids, which then help to extend the finish. And at 7%, it really needed a bigger body for me. But again, really above average offering. It's an 8 out of 10. That brings the total score on the Brew Free or Die to an 81 out of 100. Now, this was a very interesting comparison here. Two beers, both IPAs, both with the same base, same IBU, same ABV, just tweaked with the addition of Blood Orange. And as we shall soon see, that addition did alter the beer pretty significantly. So if we start with the aroma on this one, it had the same issue that the first one did because the head was so thick and pillowy. But the addition of the Blood Orange did add another element of aroma that helped bring it out. So it got 1 point higher, it gets a 7. Comparing the flavor on both were great, but this was significantly more intense. The Blood Orange added another layer of depth to the overall flavor palette, and the Blood Orange, probably due to the addition of the natural citrus oils in the skin, if they zested, rind, brewed with a peel, whatever you want to term it, it did help the cause and added extra layer of bitterness that really came through in the beer. I gave it a 9 out of 10. The body on this one. While they were the same beer, the body on this actually was a bit more robust than on this one. It felt heavier in the mouth. It still wasn't top tier, but it was enough that I gave it an extra point. I gave it a 6. Mouthfeel, same. Identical on both of these for the same reason. Really tight, fine carbonation made a very silky, creamy mouthfeel. Perfect 10 out of 10. Finish on this one. This deviates from the first one by quite a bit. That Blood Orange really added a missing key of extending many, many different elements of this beer, and the finish in particular. It was significantly longer than on the first one because that Blood Orange really stuck around, and the extra bitterness from the natural citrus oils in the skin of the fruit really, really helped the cause here. I give it a 9 out of 10. Head and retention, just as with the first, perfect 10 out of 10. You couldn't ask for better. Appearance-wise, just as with the first, granted this was slightly darker, a little more orangey hue to it because of the addition of the Blood Orange. It was still perfectly in range. I give it a 10 out of 10. Balance on this one. I gave a 9 on the first. I gave a 10 on this one. And I think it deserved it. That addition of the Blood Orange really helped to balance out and boost up multiple categories. So for my money, it was a far better balanced beer, and it does get a perfect 10 out of 10. Feeling in the intangible, 8 on the first one, perfect 10 out of 10 on this one. That Blood Orange added the missing element for me that this IPA needed. It just made everything about the base beer up a notch. It really did. They turned the volume, the dial up to 11 on this one. They did. It really altered the beer significantly and for the better. It gets a 10 out of 10 for me subjectively. Finally, as an example of the style, again, I had a few little minor nitpicks, but everything else that changed about this beer was so much better. It really only missed top tier status for me by 1 point, so I did give it a 9, and that brings the total score on the Blood Orange Brew Free or Die to a 90 out of 100. So same beer, same base, just add one ingredient, and it completely changed the beer drinking experience for me. That's a 9-point spread, an 81 versus a 90. Both well above average, but this one is getting into top tier. This was a fantastic IPA. I loved them both, but this, for my money, was the better choice. The Blood Orange really added a lot more depth of aroma and flavor, added more breadth to the body, it extended out the finish, it increased the bitters. Overall, it was just a better all-around IPA for me. Ladies and gentlemen, that's today's review. As always, I do sincerely appreciate you tuning in today. Please don't forget to like, comment, subscribe. Likes help the channel and certainly helps others find us based on YouTube's algorithms. Subscribe will keep our videos in your feed, and if you ever lose them, you can just jump straight to your subscriptions and go straight to the channel to fill in on any missing content. Comments, I want to hear from you. Please let me know your thoughts, opinions, suggestions, any questions. Just drop them in the comments and I will reply. Finally, if you want to make sure you don't miss any of our content when it goes live, you can click the notification bell icon. It is right next to the subscribe button. And as always, keep it beer, keep it craft. We'll see you on the next one. Cheers.